Hello, everybody, and welcome to the UFC Fight Night Emmett versus Stevens breakdown. This is, I think, the 13th episode of the Punchline that I've done. 12 or 13. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, the fight's coming up this Saturday, February 24th, and as the name implies, it's going to be headlined by Jeremy Stephens and Josh Emmett. Pretty good card the whole way through. You got guys like Kenan Barao, Ovince St. Preux, Mike Perry. It's a good card. There's only 4 fights on the main card, so we'll take a look at the headlining bout from the prelims. Then we'll hit a couple like discussion points that will they're kind of going to stem from the fights this past weekend, where we saw Sage Northcutt pick up a controversial decision. Right, like not. If you're a judge for this fight, it's tough because there's a good argument that Guti won. And there's a good argument that Sage won. Because if you look at octagon control and dictating where the fight takes place is part of fighting. And I think there's a good argument that if you're looking at it from that perspective, like if you're a control guy, you're going to give it to T-Ball Guti. But if you are more for the person doing the most damage, you're probably going to give it to Sage. Like I think that like no matter what you do with the judging and the rounds and the way things are scored, like at the end of the day it's still subjective, right? That's the problem with it. Like some guys are I think the judges should have to be held more accountable and explain to you why they think people won. But I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement there. But the point is, in a fight like this, it is hard to pick a winner, and you can't really blame the judges for going either way, because when Sage was hitting T-Ball, he was hitting him with the more meaningful shots, and he was getting the better of the significant striking. And like there's an argument that even though you dictated where the fight takes place, you weren't offensive and didn't really do anything with it. It's a tough one to be a judge for, but Sage got the victory. I think the fact that he was in Texas helped him out a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. It seems like if you're the home guy, you might get a nod if things are close. Who else fought? Peterson and Davis, they weren't so going into this fight in the last episode, I thought that the size was going to be a huge factor in this. And I mean, Peterson was a little bit smaller than Davis, but not by a lot, and it didn't, I mean, he still looked good. That was a really good fight. Davis was able to get I think he got a unanimous decision, right? And yeah, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be for him. I thought that I was pretty confident in that pick, and Peterson really surprised me. Most impressive guy in the card, though, to me, was Curtis Millender. Came in, I mean, it looked like he knocked Alves out in the first round and then finished him in the second, I think, if I'm thinking right. But looked good the whole fight and made it look easy against a guy in Alves who's not. I mean, that's no small task. So to conquer that in your UFC debut is a huge boost for your confidence and probably a sign that you can do some special things in this division. So I think he had the most impressive performance of the night just because, like Alves is a vet. It's your UFC debut. You got something to prove, and he looked good. Vic was able to keep Trinaldo at bay and kept the fight at a distance and kind of picked him apart. Derek Lewis had a fight where he might have lost if it goes to the judges, but pulled out the victory in the 3rd round. And then Cerrone picked up a big knockout of Yancy Medeiros in the very first round, which is a big win because Cerrone was on a 3-fight skid before that, and at welterweight too, you know. And when you start talking about this fight, it's going to lead you to, especially since Cerrone just tied, I think he tied GSP and Bisping for the most UFC wins. I think it's 20. I think that's right. I think that's the number. If that's not right, correct me. But anyway, you're going to start having the discussion about whether Cerrone belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think hands down he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's knocked out like Matt Brown, triangled Alex Oliveira. Like, you know, you go back, he's fought guys like, I know he lost, but he's fought guys like Rafael dos Anjos and Anthony Pettis and knocked out Eddie Alvarez. Or did he knock out Eddie Alvarez? I know he beat Eddie Alvarez at the point. The point is he's fought the who's who, right? Like he's fought everyone at 155, and now he's moving up to 170, and he's got quite a resume built up there. I know he's got some losses mixed in, especially that 3-fight skid that he lost was rough. But I don't think there's any doubting that Cerrone's going to be a Hall of Famer. The only argument that you're going to be able to put up against the guy is that he never held a title. Kind of like Uriah Faber in that sense, right? Like right there, but just never able to get over the hump in the UFC. I'd expect that to be. I mean, also you got to think about the fact that Cerrone's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him, so I mean I think that's gonna play into things too. Like a guy's and the UFC likes him because he's he's marketable because he's fucking crazy, but B, he's also willing to fight whenever. I mean, he's done 3-week turnarounds. I think when he fought Benson Henderson, that was like a 2 or 3 week turnaround from his last fight, and he won. And it's close. I think it was a close fight if I'm remembering correctly, but he pulled it off, and that's just who he is, you know. Like when he's one of those few guys that when they say they will fight anytime, anywhere, he really will. I think the UFC appreciates that, and I think it's gonna be a big influence on whether he gets in or not. The last thing I want to talk about, now that we did it very quick, I haven't been doing recaps because there's been a fight every weekend, right? And you got to sit down. Like I try to sit down and watch all the fights that are going to be relevant to the card coming up, but so I try to just recap it briefly at the beginning of these episodes. But the next thing that I want to talk about is what will happen if Jon Jones comes back. And if he does, what happens to the 205 division and 185, because Rockhold's down there and he wants to fight at 205. And really, when you're looking at this whole picture, right, like you got DC moving up to fight Stipe for the heavyweight title, it all boils down to what Cain Velasquez is going to do. Because if Cain decides that he wants to fight soon or stay at heavyweight, like DC's either going to have to fight a friend or move down. And I don't think he's going to fight a friend. So that means that DC is going to continue to hang out at 205 and it's going to leave Rockhold at 185. And you know, though, that like in their heart of hearts, DC wants to fight at heavyweight and Rockhold wants to fight at 205 because they're both big for the divisions that they fight in. I mean, DC's not like big like Jones, but he's just so dense through his middle and everything. And, you know, he's getting older too, so I'm sure the weight doesn't come off any easier. So it doesn't really have anything to do with Jones coming back, I guess. I think more of it depends on Cain than Jones. Because even without Jones, you've got like Alexander Gustafsson waiting there. And, you know, something still has to happen when DC and Stipe fight. Like, it's going to get really interesting if DC wins. Because it's going to be, if you can beat Stipe Miocic, I mean, how can someone tell him that he doesn't belong in the heavyweight division? And then I guess like regarding Jones, the question is, what do you do with him when he comes back? Do you make him fight DC for a third time? And I think you might be able to if it's at heavyweight. I think you might be able to sell that fight for a third time at heavyweight because you can argue in the promotion that DC really struggles to make 205 and he's performing at his best at heavyweight, which, by the way, could absolutely be 100% true. DC has never lost a fight at heavyweight. And the only fight he's lost at light heavyweight was to Jon Jones. So if that weight cut is impacting, because when you're fighting a guy like Jon Jones, you got to realize that if there is any sacrifice, like if there's anything at all taking away from your performance, it's going to be exposed against Jones because he's so good. So if DC's even a % better at heavyweight, you have a more interesting fight because when you're talking about two guys who are really like that good, like top of the food chain guys, two of the best light heavyweights to ever fight, those little differences are what win you the fight. And I mean, it could be interesting because DC will also be able to pack some more weight on. I know Jones is a heavy guy. Like, it'd be interesting to see how that fight plays out in that division, and I think he can actually sell it. With that being said, let's move on to the main card. Like I said, we're going to start off with the headlining fight for the prelims, which is going to be Renan Barão versus Brian Kelleher. And Barão is a guy who it looked like for a while like when Cruz got hurt and everything, it looked like he was on a collision fight to fight Cruz, and you were going to figure out who the best bantamweight of all time was. Like, it looked like that was just inevitable because when he came in, he won the belt. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's beat Uriah Faber twice. Went on a 9-year undefeated streak from 2005 to 2014. Renan Barão never lost a fight. He lost his pro debut, and then he won 32 straight fights. I don't know or it's 31. There's a no contest mixed in there somewhere, but the point is he went 32 fights without a loss, which is extremely impressive. And then enter TJ Dillashaw, right? And he knocks him the fuck out in the 5th, and then it changed who Renan Barão was, because to me, Renan Barão is a guy who fights with confidence, like, and not even on like a grand scale. Like, he was riding that wave of momentum through that win streak, but he fights like that in the octagon too, in the moment. Like, when he starts putting things together and he's landing combos on you and he's hitting you with his leg kicks and he's making you guess, and I mean, when he gets his confidence, he's a very hard guy to slow down. And what you saw with TJ Dillashaw is he had some answers for the things that Barao was throwing at him. And I don't think Barao liked that because he really hadn't had to deal with it up until that point. And the loss just kind of like changed who he was as a fighter. Most recently, he lost to Aljamain Sterling. Kind of the same problem I just told you about. Like, he's a confidence guy. Like, if he's riding confidence, he's doing well, and he had a good first round. And then Sterling started catching him a little bit in the second, and you just saw the performance drop off for Barao. I mean, got dominated in the third and got beat up pretty good for most of the second. He's just not the same fighter when he's not in his rhythm. But before that, he picked up a unanimous decision win over Philippe Nover, which is a good win, I mean, to get back on track. But then he has a unanimous decision loss to our headliner, Jeremy Stephens, before that. Like I said, ever since Dillashaw, man, it's just never quite been the same for him. Kind of a back and forth, you know, with wins and losses, and he's just not quite the same to me, like when I see him. This is a good fight, though, to get back to form, to get your confidence back. And the key for Brian Kelleher, who's a guy who's 18-8, right? Won his most recent bout against Damian Stasiak. He knocked him out in the third round. Before that, he has a loss to Marlon Vera. He got armbarred. And then before that, he tapped out Yuri Alcantara with a guillotine. And in a really, like, he didn't even lock up full guard when he tapped Alcantara. I mean, he locked it up, and then I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he was in half guard, and he just bit down on the back of his neck with his right leg. And when he put the squeeze on, man, Alcantara tapped fast, so you knew he had it in deep. But he's an impressive guy, and the key for him to win this fight is going to be to kind of discourage, I guess is the way to put it. Discourage Barao early. Get him out of a rhythm. Make him start doubting some things. Because what makes Barao so good when he's confident is he sees these windows and he capitalizes on them immediately. If you can start making him think twice about throwing something, then you capitalize on his hesitation. And that's what you got to do against a guy like Barao. Because, I mean, like I said, when he gets in his rhythm and he starts, like, feeling it, he's a hard guy to slow down. All that being said, Renan Barao, to me, is still one of the best bantamweights in the world. He just has to, like, get his groove back, you know, and I think this is a good fight to do it, and I think he's going to be able to pull it off. I'd expect this fight to go to a decision, but these guys are both capable of finishing the fight. Barao has, like, 15 submissions with 8 knockouts, and Kelleher has 8 submissions with 7 knockouts, I think, so there's potential for this fight to end, and they've got multiple tools to end the fight with. I just think Barao, and you're also going to see, like, Barao's fought everyone, man. I mean, he's got a lot of experience under his belt, and I think that's going to shine through in this fight. But yeah, after Kelleher, disrupt that timing early and make him start doubting himself early in the fight, and you might be able to get a win here. And it's a big win for Kelleher, who's, like, I mean, the last 3 win-loss-win, right? A win over Renan Barao starts putting you up into, like, all right, this guy's ready to start fighting some big-time names, you know what I mean? So this is a statement fight for you. So go out there and try to, like I said, just disrupt the confidence of Barao, and I think you got a shot. Next, we'll move on. We got a welterweight bout between Platinum Mike Perry and Max Griffin. And Mike Perry is a guy who I was kind of, like, harsh on because, like, don't get me wrong, you can't deny his knockout power. He has 11 wins, and they all came by knockout. But I kind of questioned his toughness and, like, what happens when you do start getting drug into deep water. And in his last fight he lost a unanimous decision to Santiago Ponzinibbio. You kind of saw that, and the guy has heart. He's tough. Sorry, my dog just ran down here, distracted me. But he does have some heart. You know, he is tough. He's a guy who kept coming and, like, kept looking for the knockout and kept looking for the finish. You know, it was a good fight for him, I think. I think it was an important loss for him to go through. I don't know what his wrestling background's like, but I know that he won an amateur Muay Thai title, a state title, I think, in Florida, born in Flint, Michigan. So I think he got into fighting because he was bullied, because he grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. And being a white kid there, I think he got picked on. That's kind of the story with a lot of kids, right? Like, they come from these troubled backgrounds and get bullied, and they want to find a way to defend themselves, and then they turn into, like, ass kickers and end up fighting in the UFC and shit. But he's going to be fighting a guy in Max Griffin, 13-4. Most recently lost to Alizo Zaleski dos Santos, unanimous decision. Before that, he knocked out Eric Montano in the first round. And before that, it was his UFC debut, and he fought Colby Covington. And I mean, love or hate Colby, I know he's always talking trash, but oh man, he's something else on the ground. He's a hard person to deal with, and you saw that in the last in the fight that Griffin fought against him. He just kind of like wore him down, and when he gets on top of you, he's hard to get off, and he's just relentless with his pressure. So that's a tough UFC debut. Like, I would have been very impressed with this kid if he could have pulled off a win against Colby that early in his career. A majority of this guy's wins have come by knockout, but that's a problem, right? Because you're fighting Mike Perry. And Mike Perry, like I said, whatever you think of the guy, he's got serious knockout power in his hands. And I think that I like Perry in this fight. I like him by second round KO, and I think that if it comes down to who's going to knock out who first, and you're talking about their ability to just like put hands on each other, I like Perry's chances. If you're Griffin, the way that you win this fight is by being unpredictable, I think, and taking it like, I'm not saying by any means that Mike Perry is one-dimensional in the way he sets up his strikes and does whatever he does to get the knockout. That's not what I mean. But you know for a 100% fact that Perry has knockout power. I mean, you got 11 fights that'll show you that. And you know that his mindset is going to be that he's coming out to knock your head off. So if I'm Griffin, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, if he's going to be one-dimensional in his mindset and the way that he's going to get this done, I'm going to be very open-minded, be open to game plan changes mid-fight, maybe even like mid-round, making adjustments constantly, like trying to do some things that you might not, calculated risk, right? Don't be fucking crazy with it, but maybe throw some things out there that you think might work. Disrupt the timing of Perry. Don't let him get in a groove where he's starting to like lure you into a brawl and hits you with that one shot that ends your night. Be unpredictable. It's going to be hard to do, though, and I think with Griffin finding success knocking people out in his past, he might think that he's the guy to do it to Perry, and Perry's very heavy-handed. Excuse me. And he doesn't have to land clean, necessarily. Like, he's got so much power that he just has to land. So, after that, we'll move on. I got something caught in my throat. After that, we'll move on to a light heavyweight bout between Ovince St. Preux and Ilir Latifi. And St. Preux is a guy, I think there's 5 Von Flue chokes that have been finished in the UFC, that have been pulled off in the UFC, and I think he's responsible for 3 of them. Jason Von Flue, I think, is the other 2. But St. Preux is 22-10. He's fought the likes of Ryan Bader, right? John Jones. I mean, Corey Anderson most recently. Yushin Okami. And he's on a 3-fight win streak with his last 3 fights were most recently Corey Anderson in a kind of back and forth fight. And if it went to the judges, he might have lost. But then he beat Okami with a Von Flue choke. And then he hit, right before that, Rogério de Lima. He hit him with a Von Flue choke too in the second round. If you're Okami, and I mean, you just saw this happen, and you see him moving into position for it, and you're hanging onto the guillotine, which is the setup for. I don't know how you pull off a Von Flue choke twice in a row in the UFC, like at that level. I don't know how Okami didn't see it coming. Anyway, the nice thing is a guy like Latifi, who has a very strong Greco-Roman background, ADCC experience, probably not going to see that. You're probably not going to see a Von Flue choke, right? So if that's the finish that you're looking for, I think you can. Don't expect it this fight. Like, Latifi has a very strong wrestling background. He's coming off a unanimous decision win over Tyson Pedro, who, if you saw a fight at UFC 21, looked very good, like very promising prospect. And before that, he lost to Ryan Bader in a fight that he looked good in. He just got hit with a nasty knee. And then he pulled off a unanimous decision win over John Valanche, which is, I mean, no easy task, but. And I like Valanche a lot, just not the most technical guy in the world. Like, he's got some things to work on, and he's kind of a brawler, right? So if you can fight a technical fight against him, you can pick up a win against and that's what Latifi did, you know what I mean? Relying on his wrestling. And for me, that's the key for Latifi in this fight is St. Preux is an athletic guy, right? I mean, he ran hurdles and stuff, I think, in high school. He did all kinds of stuff, and he played I don't think he was like a starter or anything, but I think he played football for Tennessee. So he's athletic, right? And he's a very unorthodox striker. He's not predictable. So if I'm Latifi, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to try to take this fight to the ground, and I'm going to play my strengths in this fight, especially with someone who can be unpredictable like St. Preux. don't give up on the takedowns in the first round if you're Latifi. Like, because St. Prue's a big guy and he's very powerful, and like I said, he's an athlete. Like, if he's fending off some of your takedowns, don't give up on your game plan. Like, keep grinding after that. If things don't go your way at first, don't give up on it, because if this turns into a striking match, or you start shooting from far away, like, stick to your game plan and throw nice clean shots, push it up against the fence. Like, just keep grinding out this win, because if you start getting into a striking match and shooting from, 10 feet across the octagon against St. Preux, I don't think you're going to win. I'm taking St. Preux in this fight. I think it'll go to a decision, because I think these are two pretty tough guys that are going to be hard to finish. Like I said, like St. Preux probably, I think he'll be able to defend those takedowns and stuff is the problem, though. But if I'm Latifi, I'm sticking with it. Like, don't get discouraged. What I think will happen is I think Latifi will get frustrated. But if you're going to win this fight, if you're Latifi, don't get frustrated. Don't give up on what you know and what you know you're good at. Believe in it and execute during the fight. So after that, we're going to come up on what has potential to be fight of the night, to be honest. The women's strawweight bout between Jessica Andrade and Tecia Torres. So Tecia Torres is 10-1, won her last 3 fights in a row, most recently over Michelle Waterson, unanimous decision. Before that, she beat Juliana Lima, tapped her out in the second round with the rear naked. And then she beat Beck Rawlings. The only loss on her record has come to the current champion, and that's Rose Namajunas. So not a bad resume build up here, right? The problem is you're fighting Jessica Andrade. And I think I saw the odds on this, and I could be wrong, but I think that Torres is the favorite in this fight. And I think that's probably because you're looking at, first off, she's like highly ranked, but you're looking at the records, and on paper you're seeing Tecia Torres 10-1, and then you're seeing Jessica Andrade 17-6. But the problem with that, and what people might not be taking into consideration, is that 5 out of 6 losses on Andrade's record have come at bantamweight, which is 135 pounds. This fight is taking place at 115, and that's a huge difference. And Andrade's only loss at 115 has been to Joanna. And Andrade is a person who relies on putting the pace on you and putting pressure on you and throwing a lot of volume and just mauling you, like she did to Claudia Gadelha. If you watch that fight, good Lord, the first round went pretty well for Claudia, but Jesus, as the second and third, you just saw a mauling on Andrade's end. And Claudia is no one to fuck with. She's very high level. And to be able to pull that off against someone as top flight as her is extremely impressive. And then her loss to Joanna, it wasn't that she wasn't able to keep up a pace. Like, she looked good going into even the 5th round. But the problem is that Joanna was able to keep up with that pace and make you pay for things. She made you pay for putting that pressure on her, because Joanna was able to keep up that pace so keeping up with someone doesn't always mean like pushing forward and outlanding them, right? Like, Joanna was backing up and fighting a defensive fight, but the pace, she was still able to maintain a pace, even though Andrade was the one pushing forward. She wasn't getting outworked, even though she was moving backwards. And I think that probably threw Andrade off. I think she thought that she'd probably be able to walk Joanna down and kind of land some shots, make some takedowns. And even when she would take her down, Joanna is right back to her feet constantly. Like, she doesn't give you anything down there. But before that, Andrade picked up a unanimous decision over Angela Hill in a really good fight. Like I said, a lot of that power seems to have come down with her from 135 too, when she's making the weight cut to 115. And I like Andrade a lot in this fight, just because I think that like her experience seeing Joanna and Claudia back to back, and then obviously improving from the Joanna fight, right? Like, from the time she fought Joanna to when she fought Claudia, she definitely improved. And I just don't think, like, I take this into consideration in a lot of the fights that I pick. I like people who have seen high level, like they've seen that level. Like, if you fought like Joanna and Claudia and Carolina, like I like that. I like the fact that you've been exposed to that high level of a performance or like a fight. So for Tecia, Michelle Waterson is a good win, don't get me wrong. So is Lima, and so is Rawlings. Those are all good wins. I just don't think that she's going to be able to keep up with the pace that Andrade puts on her. I'm telling you, it's fucking relentless. When she starts marching you down, she is so hard to like discourage from doing that. But the way to do, even when Joanna was countering her, she was still coming forward. But the way for Torres to win this fight, in my opinion, is when she is pushing forward, use the blueprint that Joanna laid out for you. Counter. Make her pay for pressure. That's what people don't do a lot. Like, the reason that pressure fighting works is because they're not being punished for coming in that aggressively. You have to make her not want to come in. You have to make her willing to, like, even just hesitating is good, right? Like, as long as she's not capitalizing on what she plans to do, you're winning a little bit there. I like Andrade, and I like her by decision, and I think it's going to be really one-sided. You might see a couple 10-8 rounds. I could be wrong. Torres could be... I mean, she could be much improved. And like I said, to me, the key is going to be, like, I don't think you're going to see Torres pushing forward, but you have to be able to keep up the energy that Andrade is putting out and outland her and make her pay for coming in. I just think Andrade is so fucking good. When I thought she should have got the title shot against Rose when Rose knocked out Joanna. I mean, what I think doesn't really matter, but I just thought that she was a worthy competitor. Now she's going to fight. I mean, don't get me wrong, Torres is a top, like, she's one of those girls who are in the mix, right? Like, she could compete for a title with this win, but I just think I think Andrade is a killer, and I think it's I see it being one-sided. I can be wrong. I'm confident in Andrade. I'm more confident with her, to be honest with you, than every fighter on this card. Maybe I'm pretty confident in Perry, but I like Andrade's chances a lot. I think she's so fucking good. But after that fight, we'll be getting to watch the headliner between Josh Emmett and Jeremy Stephens. And Jeremy Stephens is a guy who, I'll tell you what, Stephens is a guy who has been, I mean, it's his thing, right? He's got knockout power. He relies on throwing heavy hands at you, and, like, he's throwing everything he's got. But if you go back and watch the Gilbert Melendez fight, Melendez is a guy who kind of counts on getting out those gritty wins, right? Like those wrestling wins. He's got you up against the cage and he's making it dirty. And Stephens beat up on that leg. And you need your legs under you to do all that stuff. And I think Stephens fought a very smart fight when he fought Melendez. And I think that fight might be indicative of his evolution as a fighter, because he's got like a 27-14 record. And I think he's like 15-14 after he just knocked out Doo Ho Choi in the UFC. So, I mean, he's got like a 500 record, right? So it's nothing crazy. But he's been on a little bit of a surge lately on this 2-fight win streak. I mean, and the guys that he's lost to recently are like Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway, right? And he beat Renan Barão when Barão tried out at featherweight and shit like that. But I just like how Stephens has looked a lot lately. The problem is that he's run into Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett is a killer. And if you see... So there's a fight that I was hypercritical, like I was extremely critical of this fight because I thought the judges really missed this one that cost Emmett a loss, and that was Desmond Green in Buffalo, and I was there for that fight. And when you're at a fight, well, let me start off by saying I rewatched it last night, and I thought Green won. Like, I mean, like you could say Emmett won, maybe. Like I could understand the split decision kind of, but I thought that Green won the second and third round, no problem. Thought he outlanded him, and I think that Joe Rogan said something, and it was a really good point. He said, if you were the judges, you might be seeing the volume that Emmett is putting out and thinking that he's winning the fight and that he's landing more than he really is. And when you're in the stands like I was, I try to watch the octagon, like the actual octagon itself, when they're striking, and when it goes to the ground, I just immediately look up at the screen because I'm trying to see like all the little intricacies of what they're doing on the ground, right? Like, because I practice jiu-jitsu not near as often as I should. Not that I'm good at it, but I understand more about the ground setups than I do the striking. And that's also partly because, like, in my opinion, the best way to implement successful jiu-jitsu and MMA is to just get really good at fundamentals and basics, because there's a lot of fancy stuff that you just can't do in a fight. I mean, there's some stuff that you might be able to pull off that looks good, but, like, a lot of it you might be trying to get up above the knee to get a leg lock in. That's fucking hard because people are punching you in the face on the way there. Like, there are a lot of things that get complicated when you let people punch and kick you and elbow you. Anyway, I thought watching from the crowd that Emmett clearly won the fight. And I was wrong. I mean, like, I went back and watched that, and I was 100% wrong. That's one that, like I said, I'm glad the judges actually got that right for Green. I thought, and he was also a guy, I think he went to the University of Buffalo, and we were in Buffalo, so I was like, they're giving it to the hometown guy just because the crowd's behind him, and that wasn't the case, so a little too harsh there. But anyway, Emmett's a guy who planned on fighting at 145, but he got the call from the UFC for a 155-pound bout. Took it, won, started doing well there, ran into some trouble with Green, dropped to 145, and then picked up a win over Felipe Aranches. And then the most impressive win of his career, I know he missed weight for it, but it was on 3-week notice against Ricardo Lamas, who's the number 3 guy in the world, and he knocked him the fuck out in the first round with a clean hook, like as clean as it gets. And I mean, to be able to pack that kind of power at 145 where you're hitting a guy and he's out cold before he hits the mat, that's fucking impressive. And Emmett is a guy who moves his head a lot. I really like the combos that he throws together, and I like his chances to end this fight, to be honest with you. Don't get me wrong, I could absolutely see Jeremy Stephens ending it with a big shot too, because the power that he has in his hands is undeniable. But especially when you look at what he did to like Rafael dos Anjos, right? Like the uppercut he landed on him was nasty. He's got a bunch of other highlights that I can't think of off the top of my head. I know he's got some big names on there. Anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephens does land, but when they get into those, like, I think this is going to be, I think probably this or Andrade Torres will be your fight of the night. The problem with this fight is it might not go 3 rounds. It might, it very well might, because you're talking about 2 high-level fighters, and it might be a little bit harder to reach that knockout. But when they get into those exchanges, expect the difference to be Emmett being a little bit cleaner and crisper with the combinations that he puts together and getting out just a little bit better than Stephens does. Like getting out of those exchanges just a little bit cleaner and like not getting hit. You might see him get hit, but I think Stephens will take a brunt of the damage. And I mean, when Emmett hits you, man, he's got some serious power in his hands too, as he showed in the last fight. I like Emmett by 2nd round knockout, maybe 3rd round. And it'll be interesting to see too how Emmett looks in a 5-round fight if it does start going into the championship rounds. So let's go back through, recap. I'll give you a fighter to watch, then I'll talk about who I think will get fight of the night, which we kind of already went over, right? All right, so first I'm taking Barao. I think you'll see him come out strong, ride that confidence out to a win. If you're Kelleher, discourage him early. Throw off his timing, make him hesitate, throw off that confidence as soon as you can. I'm taking Mike Perry. 2nd round knockout. It might be earlier, it might be 3rd. I don't know. He might not even win. But I like Perry's chances to land a big bomb against Griffin. I'm taking St. Preux over Latifi. I think St. Prue's just going to be a son of a bitch to try to drag to the mat. Latifi, though, like I said, don't give up on your game plan and don't start shooting sloppy shots. Don't get frustrated. If he can do that, he might be able to pull off a win by relying on his wrestling. Like, if you're going to win this fight, you really got to rely on what you're good at. Ooh. All right. Let's hurry up so I can get a drink of water or something. All right. Raj. I just don't... Sorry, this just cut off, so I don't know where it's picking up. Strawweight bout between Jessica Andrade and Tisha Torres. I like Andrade. I don't think Torres will be able to keep up with the pressure. Josh Emmett versus Jeremy Stephens. I like Emmett because I think he'll get the better of some of the exchanges that they get into. I think this will be an exciting fight. And then fight of the night, I'm gonna give it to Emmett and Stephens just because I could see it potentially going like 3 rounds, and I think there'll be a lot of exciting stuff happening in that 3 rounds. 15 minutes is a lot of time for these guys to throw their hands around. But if that, I think that Andrade and Torres will go the distance, and that'll be your fight of the night if Emmett and Stephens is not. And then fighter to look out for is the guy fighting on the Fight Pass prelims, Oliver Mercier. He is 10-2. He's won 3 in a row, including a win over Drew Dober. And he had to fight through some adversity. He got tagged a little bit early in the first round. But when he gets you to the ground, I mean, he's phenomenal. And he's really exciting to watch. And I think he's a promising prospect at welterweight. There's a lot of those guys, man. 170 is an interesting division because you got an odd mix of old experienced veterans like Damian Maia, Carlos Condit, like Matt Brown still fighting. Now Cerrone's up there. I mean, Medeiros has quite a few fights under his belt. And then you got guys like these, like Abel Mercier is 10-2, right? But he's a promising prospect. Pretty soon you're going to see those guys start to fight each other. And you're going to figure out, like, is this wave of youth going to overwash all of these old experienced guys? Or are we going to see these experienced guys kind of teach these kids a lesson? And basically, like, you're not ready yet, but you're coming up through. Like, I think this year we're going to see some fights where we start to figure out who's going to win that little battle there. Might push some guys out into retirement, and it might push some guys further back down the rankings and have to work their way back up. But that's always good, right? Like if those young guys lose to those old vets, they always take something away from it if they're smart. That's it, guys. I think next weekend is Cyborg and I don't even know her name. I have to like watch her fight. But Frankie Edgar's fighting Brian Ortega as well. So we'll do one of these for that pay-per-view. And until then, we'll see you guys later. Thank you.